Got it.
Got it. Okay. Here we are again with another Pickled Dragon Unscripted. This time we are bringing to you some very, very fine game masters. I'm going to say game master because we'll hopefully be able to talk about a bit more than just Dungeons and Dragons tonight. But we have with us, as always, the very talented Ashley Goldmoon, Lady of the Plains. Go ahead and take it away there, Ashley.
It is I, Goldmoon, also known as Ashley in the human realm. It's always a pleasure to be here at the Pickled Dragon. I see Matt's taking a swig of some fine ale.
Purple
I have
haze.
mine here. Ooh. Yes, so I'm definitely excited to get started, and I'll pass it over to Rachael.
Hi, I'm Rachael. In a lot of social medias, you'll see me as Pip400 Art. I like to do arts, obviously, and I do commissions, a lot of D&D commissions of people's characters, as well as, drawing my own and designing them. Me and my husband stream together on Twitch. That's kind of been our main thing lately. So we're under Marquee Gaming. And so I'll do art on Mondays. People can watch me draw D&D commissions live. And we also have a D&D 5e homebrew game that my husband runs. It's post-apocalyptic, so it's pretty fun. So if you ever want to come check us out and hang out and chat with me and with my husband, then come over because it's fun.
Cool. Ray, what do you got?
Sure. Hey, it's Ray with GotDM. That's GOT_DM. I craft, I DM, I do a bunch of other weirdness, and I can do a backflip. I can't do that. So
but demonstrate it.
I was like, I tried. Let's see. Do I have anything currently that I'm doing? Honestly, I've just been focusing a lot on me and just kind of like wandering the world and kind of exploring things out there. So finding things for more inspiration. I've been running a game for a good part of 27 years, and about DMing from just as long. So it's been it's been an interesting ride, seeing different versions and variations. But I think the one thing that I always love is the community that it creates. So that's why I'm here.
Nice.
Malcolm.
My name is Malcolm. On social media, I go by the Gentleman Game Master. I am mostly a professional dungeon master. And what I mean by that is that people who are searching, not everyone can find a table that they can get into very quickly and hit the ground running with a dungeon master or dungeon masters or game masters who can really help them and who are very welcoming. My group, I have a meetup group through the Meetup app called the D&D Experience Point that allows people to join a number of games that we run every month. My thing is that I really focus on trying to make the game as immersive as possible, as cinematic as possible. Ray is one of he probably doesn't know he's a guru of mine, but I literally sap everything he does up. I also have a YouTube channel where you can see those very games from the meetup when we post them. Instagram, Gentleman_Game Master, and that's me. I'm really excited. Thank you, Pickled Dragon, for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. You're one of the first people I thought of because I've seen your cinematic universe.
Oh, it's so good.
It's it is the MCU, right? It's the Malcom.
it's kind of it really is.
So
that's a great way to put it.
You two have been game mastering, GMing for quite a long time, and Rachael, you picked it up just a few years ago, right?
Yeah, I kind of was doing it on and off. I was the one that got my husband into it, and I did it for about a year, and then kind of lost interest because he liked it more. And then I decided I wanted to try again later, and kind of picked it up more in earnest and more consistently about 2.5 years ago now.
Right on.
So,
so that I kind of want to get a baseline feel for where you guys are coming from when you run a game. And I guess we should look at dungeon mastering, because one of the things that we're looking at is Ashley's journey at becoming a dungeon master herself. So Ashley, actually, you played in high school many moons ago, gold moons ago. And But now but that was like third edition days, right?
I honestly don't even know. All I do know is that I created an orc wizard as my first ever character,
Nice.
and it went about as well as you could imagine, but it was fun. Yeah, I don't currently play Dungeons and Dragons, but
That's gonna change.
I'm here to learn from you all and begin my own journey.
That's right. So she is taking a journey. We are going to run a game for her, and you'll be able to see those episodes once we actually kick it off on the YouTube channel as well. We are going to record those as we go.
Nice.
So we have kind of an interesting thing lined up for her because she is our resident Dragonlance scholar. She has read every book multiple times.
Hold on.
Oh.
Not every book when there are dozens upon dozens of them, but I have read approximately 30 to 35 Dragonlance books. So yes, I do know what I'm talking about.
Oh, nice.
And the Chronicles though multiple times, though, right?
Oh yes, of course.
Yeah, okay. So I was partially right. Partially right. She knows more than I do about Dragonlance. Let's just say that. And she was very eager to run a Kender. So what we did was,
Yeah.
so what we've done is we were taking the Dragonlance races, and since we need to put her out of her element a little bit to make it very, very exciting, we are taking the Dragonlance races and we're going to put them in Greyhawk. And so she is going to enjoy the first bit of homebrew that we can thrust upon her, if you will. But
I don't even know what that means. I don't know what a Greyhawk is.
Well, that's good then, because you will be a wide-eyed adventurer, whipped up in a whirlwind adventure. So it's going to be great. So yes, Ashley, you're going to have a good time and you're going to learn the ropes and hopefully learn a bit tonight. But what I'm curious about, to get a baseline off of everyone, in terms of Dungeons and Dragons, what is your philosophy as a game master when you approach a new game with a table full of new players, or even your existing group? Like for myself, I really like low magic, dark and gritty worlds where the players really have to scrape and crawl and fight for everything that they have. That's my favorite way to run a game. Now, don't worry, Ashley. I'm not going to do that to you. We're going to have a good time.
I can handle it.
Okay, you're on then. So, but my philosophy is that the joy of the game, like players feel the most fulfilled when they have to fight for every inch that they take, right? If it comes too easy, then it becomes, I believe, and it's my observation, is that it becomes less fun. But I would like to hear from you guys what when you approach game design and your tabletop, if you will, how do you attack building your adventure? So whoever wants to run with that. Rachael.
Oh, sure. Well, I've discovered my sweet spot is DMing pre-written campaigns because my strength is not homebrew. I discovered that very early on. I tend to not see plot. I don't see plot holes until they're just there. I don't do that well with it. But if I already have a pre-structured story that I can work within, then I like to focus on my sweet spot, which is really delving deep into each character that my players made, and really trying to involve their backstory and get them as invested as possible that way, trying to find things to tie it in. I really like doing that. That is one of my favorite things. And I love being able to with that moment when you see that their investment is like they're invested in the game because I was able to pull in a part of their backstory is like my favorite thing. So I think that's the biggest thing I rely on. People tell me that my strength is the emotional side of the game. So I rely on other things like pre-written campaigns for the other things that I don't do so well in. So that's kind of what I end up doing.
Well, that's probably the best thing you could do if your strength is not homebrew at all. You know, just getting your players invested is huge.
Yeah.
And the best way to do that is to rope in a character's history, then they really feel a part of the story.
Definitely.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well,
I think that's.
Or Ray, you got it. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I'm actually quite the opposite, where I don't think I've ran a pre-made campaign since '97. But I think that's the other part, though, is that, you know, you find so many ways to create that story. And I think my philosophy has always been make it about the players, make it about their stories, and create the environment that they can excel at. I'm routinely telling my players, you can't be epic in a broom closet. So it's, you know, if you want those epic moments, you want those, you know, Aragorn versus like the crowd of people, get out there and get it for yourself, you know. And I think the other part too, that, and it's always been my philosophy, where if I have new players, always strive to make the player next to you epic, because as long as everybody's doing that at the table, which you then foster in, is an environment where it's not always about me, but it's the cohesion of the story. So I absolutely love that. And one thing I will say though, as one that has leaned heavy on the homebrew, you know, there are plot lines or plot holes that come up, and it's your exact point, you know, those atrocious, like, oh my gosh moments. But sometimes it is. And I think that's the part I love about being a DM, is there's a level of poker face that you have to maintain throughout all of that, where it's like, if you know, there's like, you get a player that's like, if they touch this button, something's really bad's gonna happen, and you're just gonna, okay, you know. So that's just always been my philosophy. Yep.
That's awesome.
Yeah, my philosophy, it's actually so funny. It's a combination of all three, Rachael, Ray, and Matt. In one tone, I run, because the pro team's on me, I'm introducing a lot of people to the game, or people that want to jump into one of the mini campaigns that Wizards of the Coast might produce. So I do run a lot of the campaigns that are the pre-made modules. That said, so far, none of those modules have gone to completion and had the same story that's in that book. So I lean heavy on character over world building. I believe that I allow my characters to help me build the world. Just because I'm fascinated with their backstories and the towns and things like that they contribute to the world. And I think the closest thing to homebrew that I'm running is Theros, which is the Magic the Gathering D&D world. But because there's no pre-written campaign, we're just, you know, frolicking around in the world. What's one thing about that Matt said is that I like that low level, gritty, Dark Souls type Conan the Barbarian. Like I could die at any moment. Yeah. One of the games I love to play is Morkborg for that very reason. I like that old metal version of D&D. But I know that's not where most of my players are at. So I don't try to force that on them or try to get them to kind of see the light. I, in turn, like what 5th edition has done. It, like you said, the MCU, it has made every player feel like an Avenger. And I really lay heavy into that until they get really, really comfortable with their characters. And then I turn up the heat when they really love the characters a lot. So I do a slow burn on making the game. Hard mode comes at some point, and then it's like, oh my gosh, what is happening? It's like, what happened? Why is Malcom being so brutal now? But I make sure that they know at the beginning there's a chance it gets really brutal at some point, and as long as they co-sign, I'm like, okay. And then after 16 sessions, they're like, why are you killing everybody? I'm like, this is what was going to happen.
Yeah.
So that's the way I
signed up for this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I definitely feel like I definitely feel like 5th edition has done a lot insofar as to capture that crowd that loves the Marvel universe, because every character does have the capability of doing some pretty spectacular things, you know. And there are other game systems, like you mentioned, that I like. My new group, when I moved to Louisiana, I tried to talk them into playing second ed, and they weren't having it. They were just like, no, we want to do 5e, and
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, we'll just stick with 5e then. But it was for that reason, because I do like the hard mode. But I did sit them down, and I did kind of lay out my philosophy. I said, I really like to do the dark and gritty game where there are emotional twists, if you will. And if you don't want me to go there, we don't have to go there. And they're like, no, let's bring on hard mode. I'm like, all right, you asked for it. But one of the things that I think is important is just to come to that agreement. I think Ray, you may have mentioned it, or Malcom, is to have that agreement ahead of time. You know, not to go to certain places if people don't want it. And for a while there, there's certain plot lines that are coming up for my game that I'm a little worried about, because they agreed to certain things, but they've become very emotionally invested in certain angles of that. So, and there goes the laundry. The laundry alarm is going, and it's going to go off again in about 30 seconds. So I apologize in advance. But
I got a question. I got a question for everybody.
Yeah.
So like, is it easy or difficult to keep the game progressing in the direction that you guys are originally planning? And is it frustrating to see it be derailed? Is it easy for you to keep your players on track? We'll go to Ray on this one, everybody.
Sure. My thing on that is I routinely give my story to my players. I think that's the best part about it sometimes, is that you may have a concept, you may have an idea. For instance, I want to go, I want to do a heist, and all of a sudden your player's like, well, I just want to go shopping today. And I think at that point, you really have to just go, you had ideas, you had these aspirations, give it to your players. Because ultimately, if you give it to your players, it essentially creates that sweet spot where they're looking to play that game that day. And what it inevitably will end up with is that they are going to be invested, micro investments if at most, but invested as a whole. So that's just my look on that. How about you, Malcom?
Okay.
I would piggyback on Ray and say absolutely. When you were saying, like, when do you feel frustrated when you're playing? It's like, don't plan. What I mean, there's a lot of planning that goes into D&D, but don't plan. You can't plan the direction of your story. It's not like writing a novel. So you have, for example, for me, is I don't plan. I learned this a lot from like lazy dungeon masters. Like, I don't plan more than 2 or 3 sessions ahead, if that. But I do have a loose outline on like where I think the overall campaign might go. But I'm constantly revising that outline, because as they do things per session, I'm like, that no longer works. Throw it out. That doesn't work. That big bad, that's not going to happen at all. And then there's some big things that are always just floating in the ether that are going to happen no matter what. But those have to be things that no matter what they do, they're going to happen in your world. Those things are okay to keep there. So, and some players, like Ray said, if you give them the story, like if they're playing a story about fighting Tiamat, then they know at the end of the story they want to fight Tiamat, so everything leads to that, and then that you're okay with. But if you're playing in a world where you're trying to develop this overarching amazing villain that happened to be one of their NPCs, that may not happen, and you have to be willing to just not let that happen and let it go the direction that. Because I have found the most fulfilling moments come from them breaking something that I thought I really wanted to happen and going in a new direction. Like, amazing things happen when you just let go.
Yeah, so it's constantly evolving from the sound of it.
What do you say, Rachel?
That's good. Keeps it interesting.
Yeah.
Rachel.
Well, yeah, and I've really liked hearing more experienced DMs' perspectives, because like I remember when I first started DMing, I'm one of those people, like in all my personal life in general, I'm really bad with change, and especially sudden change. So when I first started DMing and players would do things that I didn't even know how to react to. I'm not a good improver. I don't adjust on the fly very well. So like Ray was joking earlier about like just crying at the table. Like I'd have to either leave the room or like sometimes I'd like cry after my sessions because I was just like, I don't know what to do. Like I don't know how to adjust this. Like what they're doing is like fine. It wasn't like my players were just being like going off the rails in a bad way, but it's just like I didn't know how to adjust. And so I finally gave myself permission to step away sometimes, to take breaks. I gave myself permission to be like, hey guys, we're going to end a little early because you did something I didn't expect. I don't know what to do. I got to think about it for a week. And just giving yourself some space if you're not good at improv on the fly really, really helped me. And then sometimes, like what you both were saying, like sometimes when your players do stuff you're not expecting, it can lead to some of the best things. But there are some people out there who can adjust immediately, and there are some people like me that don't. And either way, it's fine. You can still DM. It's just, it might depend on like how you move forward. It'll look a little differently, I think.
What I find that's oh, go ahead. Oh
no, I was gonna say I use those bathroom breaks to rewrite a whole story. Sometimes I'll be like, why don't we refill our drinks and everybody go to the restroom quick? I'm like, maybe I'll put this here. You know? They're like, man, Malcolm's been off camera for like 15 minutes. You know, like you gotta do it.
Yeah. I think what helps me sometimes in that situation is that, you know, as a DM or just as a game master, you're always asking the questions why. And sometimes creating those opportunities, like if an NPC comes up to them and just goes, you know, why would you be going over to that garden? And then your players are describing it, and all of a sudden they start role playing, and it gives you a better perspective of the why they want to do something, which then you can kind of build out the shell around that. But because a lot of it is for me at least, what I find challenging is if my players take a right turn, I'm going, why do they do that? And all of a sudden I'm just trying to like kick those reasons in my head when the solution is throw random NPC in front of them and go, why are you doing that? And all of a sudden it's like, oh, because we want to do this. I'm like, perfect. All right, let's go from there.
Right, that's so dead. Like when I take
smart.
like in my home game, and it's even more so on Zoom, I'm letting too many secrets out here, but like I would just like turn off my camera, and most of my players think, okay, I'm now leaving. And I leave. But when I come back, I will usually sit there and listen, and they're talking. And they're like, we're going here because we want to do this. Oh my God, this is probably going to, sometimes they are saying what's probably going to happen. I'm like, that's not going to happen. And then sometimes I have an idea. I'm like, ooh, that might be actually really cool to happen. And so you're really just feeding off of them. Another good thing, especially Rachel, if you run a lot of, I've done a lot with running a lot of these modules, is to take important NPCs that the module says are super important to the overall story, like Dragon Heist, right? I'm playing Dragon Heist because I'm playing with a really group of very like veteran like role players. Like it's just not going according to any of the plans in the book. And so because of that, it's really good though. I'm just taking, like I decided to turn one of the families that's really important, make them one of the NPC, one of the players, because the player's backstory family, that kind of works. I started like moving people around so they end up being the same archetype that I need them to be for the story, but now they're connected to the player, right? And that's been super helpful for me too. And this is sometimes it's just a quick little switcheroo there, and then, you know, make notes and make it canon, but that works too, where you can still kind of keep what you want, but suddenly, and then no one's ever the, you know, wiser about it.
Definitely.
Malcolm, what Malcolm said about listening to your players, and Ray, you said it too, but Malcolm, you hit on something that is, I think, not talked about a lot, and that is when the players start interacting amongst themselves and saying, well, what's this demon up to? Is she doing this or is she doing that? Or, you know, a lot of times you'll have a plan and you'll think in your head, this is a great idea, but the players will say something that's completely off the rails as to what you were planning, but it's a hell of a lot better idea than what you had. And you're like, yeah, that's, you just nailed it, guys. They don't even know, you know, and you're just like, yeah, that's perfect. Keep talking. So you really got to be willing. Like I only plan one session in advance. So I run on Sundays, Saturday night, I sit down and I just plan one, like, okay, this is what's happened so far. Where can I go with this? Because it might be completely unlike what I had planned initially. I know where I want to go. I know where I want to end up down the road, but I don't know how we're going to get there, basically. So, but yeah, absolutely. So, Ashley, I know you had some other questions we had talked about earlier for these guys about their very first session they would ever run.
Yeah, I have, well, not related to that. I have another question that I need to ask. Do you guys have issues as far as loyalty goes, like with your returning? Do you have returning players for your sessions, or do you have like new faces with like your games that you're playing?
Sure. So with a campaign that I've been running for 27 years, I have a lot of returning players, but I also have players that from like the Instagram communities that will jump in and do one shots and things like that. I think when it comes down to loyalty of the table, first and foremost, make it a game that you can enjoy, because you're going to be the only consistent, quite frankly. Because even if you have many other players, one day they could go, I want my paladin attack this way. And all of a sudden that view, because you're looking at them as a character, can completely change. So my look on that is the only loyalties that I personally have, and I say this to my players all the time, I'm the world. I will build the world and morph the world around your characters. But that's the consistent. Everything else, go knock it out of the park. You know what I mean? You want to play a different character anytime, go ahead. But that's how I look at it. And yeah, no, I never find it offensive if a player is like, oh, well, this is not my cup of tea, or, it's time to kind of move on. And I've always said this, the mark of a great DM is when you see your player go, I want to try it at the table, or I want to be a DM as well. And at that point, I'm like, go for it. You know what I mean? Like, that's really awesome. So yeah, that's my perspective on it.
Cool.
You can go first if you want. Yeah.
Oh, I would say that mine's an interesting situation because when you say loyalty, do you mean like more so about players being consistently showing up for the game, like, or?
Yeah, more like invested in the game, invested in the story, and returning players. Yeah.
Honestly, I think the investment typically comes with time. It comes with you finding the right type of players, and that can always be a journey in itself, right? Everyone doesn't have the luxury of just having like 5 great friends that want to come over every 2 weeks or every week and run a game. I started with the way I started my kind of coming back. I always played role playing all my life, but I took a huge break between like college and when in high school and college. And then eventually I came back to the game with around 5th edition. But right before that, I played a little Pathfinder. And I just I knew that I had nobody really in my life playing the game. So I invited some friends over. I invited like 8 friends over just to try this new thing called D&D. I introduced them to the game. And over that 8, we kept playing. And as we kept playing every once a month, sometimes twice a month, eventually I knew who the people that were really dedicated. Now, this is going to sound a little harsh, but I literally kicked some of my friends to the curb. At some point, there were the friends who were coming over and just liked to come to have a beer, shoot the shit, beer and pretzels. They weren't really invested, but they liked being there. And I like being with them, but I had other ways to be with them. I could go to the bar with them. I could go watch a game with them. So when my buddy was watching like sports on his phone while we're at the table, I'm like, it's time for you to skedaddle out of the game. And so until I had a core group of only 4 players, and those 4 out of the 8, we played for another, 2 years, and to this day, play the game as my home group. On the other side of that, as a pro DM, it's weird. I find that for pay players they've all become super close friends, and now there are no new faces ever. Like I have a problem like getting people are pretty much asking me to play the game, and I'm turning people away at this point because now I'm stretched thin. All the players I have are locked in, and there's something weird about they're more consistent than my best friends. When we play, my best friends cancel, they change the game, they go, I can't make it, I forgot I had such and such going on. But there's something about for play players that investment, they understand my time is invested, they understand that I've prepped 4 to 8 hours for the game. they're there, and very rarely there's somebody that can't make it, and if so, they're like, I'm so sorry, I'll be there next time, you know. So it just takes time, and it depends on what kind of approach to the game you want, and just like a player's trying to find the right DM, as a DM or GM, you're trying to find the right players, and it takes a while. Sometimes it just takes you but just invite people. Start by just inviting people to play it with you.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, I'm so
Rachel,
long.
do you have anything to add?
No, I mean, I agree with Malcolm. There's definitely been people sometimes in our like core friend group where you're just like, we can't play together anymore. Like this is not working out. And it, you know, if it's said in the right way, there's no offense taken. And they usually probably agree with you as well. And they're like, yeah, I don't really want to play with you either. Like, I'm good. So yeah, I think it's definitely a process. It's a process to see who's going to actually be invested and going to take the time to even pay attention to what you're trying to do versus who's like just here to have a good time and that's about it. I usually I've been lucky in the way that most people that I've DM'd for have been really respectful of my time and tried to always make it, and usually when I DM for people, they want me to DM again, which is really nice, and it means I did something right, so yay. But I think it's always a new opportunity when you DM for a different group of people, and it kind of opens up how are the dynamics going to work, and a lot of times I think having conversations of what your expectations are going to be beforehand definitely helps with that process of, you know, I want you to pay attention, I want you to respect each other, all that stuff. So
I think also the longer you game with a particular group, you'll find that every once in a while that you have to remind them that you invest a lot more of your time into the game than players typically do.
yes.
And then when they get that reminder, then they're suddenly in, and they're you know, very focused. But there's been a few times where I've had to remind people, you know, whether they're messing around at the table or not paying attention at all, and they're just waiting for their turn to throw a die. And it's just kind of frustrating because, you know, like Malcom, 4 to 8 hours a week is a lot of time, you know. And I probably spend more time thinking about D&D than most any other recreational activity, you know, just thinking about it. And then every once in a while I'll hit a gem of an idea and I'll quick write it down, but and then start writing that on my Saturday where I prep. But boy, it's frustrating when you look around the table and there's four or five people at the table and there are 3 phones out, you know. But you know, it's something that, you know, I think in this day and age, especially where people, you know, there's entertainment or something to do always at a hand's grasp, and when their player or their character is not necessarily involved, it's hard to blame a person, because it's almost a reflex action for a lot of people. They just pull out their phone if they're not engaged. But at the same time, you know, when they say what just happened enough times, it just gets frustrating.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why in my games, if I'm going over something and I notice that players are not paying attention to things, and you mention a name or you mention a character tidbit and someone will go, hey, what was that character mentioning? I always respond back with, if it wasn't important for you to write it down, then it wasn't important for me to remember it. And at that point, they will run with it. I've had players come up with bad names. I've had players come up with bad plot devices, and all it does for me is add another avenue to add more stuff to. So
I like it.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
And that's something, one of the things I do for my campaigns is I have a website put together for each campaign. And so the characters have campaign journals, but I always tell them, when you write your campaign journal, you have to write it from your character's perspective. So if your character forgot something or wasn't there for something or misinterpreted something, you have to put that in your journal. You can't put in the correct version of what happened. And it's made for some really funny reading.
That's great.
Oh, gosh.
I love these.
Yeah, one of the things we did when we started up, when we started a new group of players, is that the players, very similar to your campaign journals where they have to make notes, but we have as an option, they can do a video to record themselves, like telling the story as if someone is watching them, and they can do flair, they can wear costumes. We've had players wear costumes. We've had players do really good backgrounds. We've had some players do like animation, but it
Wow.
lets them engage in a way. What I take away from it is whatever they put is the stuff that sticks. It's the stuff that sticks to your ribs. So then I go, oh, then that NPC I created that tried to go in there and weasel his way in, they didn't care about that person.
They didn't care about
yeah.
Yeah, that's why I
That's
like even
super
like when
fun.
we start a session doing recap is I don't even do anything as amazing as Matt's journals or Ray's like videos and stuff. That's really cool. Those ideas I should probably use. But just having other people recap the story sometimes. Why don't you guys tell me what you remember from last? Because whatever they remember, like you said, is definitely the most important things. It means the things and it lets you know you're not going into the session focusing on something that no one cares about.
That's so true. So true. Yeah, that I go back. It's kind of like Simon Sinek, where he's like, understand the why, because like once you figure out those motives, it's like it's building a house around that. You know what I mean? I love that. Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Just to change topics a bit, I suppose. Question for everybody: where do you feel like you tend to draw inspiration from for your dialogue, storyline, characters? Do you feel like you draw inspiration from mostly media that you consume, or is it something original that you have concocted in your mind? We'll go to Malcolm.
For me, it's almost, which was funny because that leads in directly what I was going to ask everyone, but for me, it's almost 100% film. I love books too, and I definitely I'm trying to read more, but I spend so much time reading D&D lore and D&D stuff. I want to read stuff outside of, but I'm always prepping for games. But I'm such a cinephile and have such a wealth of knowledge from the movies that I've watched and loved growing up with. Is that, and when I say film, I don't mean fantasy film. So I like to take stuff from my favorite movies and interject them into fantasy. So I could take a moment from this moment from The Professional or this moment from The Godfather, but I want this moment to be felt in my D&D game. I won't try to replicate the scene. I'm trying to replicate the tone or the feeling. Like I might watch a Sergio Leone film and go, oh my God, I want that feeling when they face off against the bad guy, even though it's not going to be a shootout or it's not going to be a Western, but I want that moment, that long, big drawdown. And I have to figure out how to put that in the game. And the players should never really be paying attention to it. It's kind of like a soundtrack or a score. I'm obsessing over the music. They shouldn't really, they should just feel it, So I do all that obsessing of kind of like, so all of my inspiration comes from film. a lot of it from film.
That's cool.
Cinematic Interesting. Moments. Yeah. Ray, how about you?
Sure. Mine is I am a huge lover of different civilizations and tribes. So for me, I pull a lot of inspiration from, like, if I go, one of the things I'm reading right now are Siberian tribes from like different parts of history and different parts of there. So things like that. So I always put in context for me is like, when the players go somewhere and they go, what do they eat? What do they enjoy for fun? What is their, what do they ride around? It's like saying you're going to see a whole bunch of reindeer or a whole bunch of sleds, or better yet, basing things on like nomads. I love that. There's all this history prior to, like, it's like looking at the Mongolians or looking at some of the indigenous tribes in the Philippines, like things that really inspire me for that. Because then you start looking at also details like, how do they share information? Well, they tell each other. It's through orating, it's through written word or tablets, or like, you go to a civilization, it's like you see hieroglyphs or things like that. So, a lot for me when players go, oh, I meet a different society in your world, I could be basing that entire society on like, Native Americans, or better yet, like different aspects of it. So you already have a mindset, like if they meet a warrior, this is a prideful warrior, or if they meet like a, if it's a female warrior and you're looking at more of a female run to society, you have that way to go, this is how they act, and you have references that you can pull. And that's the coolest thing, is there's all this knowledge that's already there, so you can just kind of just take it and consume it. What about you,
Yeah.
Rachel?
Sounds like a fun way to do some
Yeah.
research at the same time.
Yeah. Also historical knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that I get more inspiration from like whatever entertainment I'm watching, but I don't realize it. I think I absorb it and then put it out in a certain circumstance, and someone will later be like, that reminded me of this. I'm like, that's probably where I got it. So I don't think I consciously do it. I just think it's my own really brilliant original idea, and then later I'm like, no, I think I got that from somewhere. But I really just enjoy, I think that inspiration is when I will watch a show or read a book or even play a video game where if there's a scene that invokes a lot of like an emotional response, or like you really feel something for an NPC, or you really understand what's going on with them, or like if there's a way I can communicate almost like either like an NPC's like almost like their soul, or like what their true motivations are, I really like doing that. So like there was a Curse of Strahd game I was playing where or I was running where there's a character, he was looking for his he thought his wife was dead, and I made it so that she had survived whatever and she was out running around alive, and he found one of her journals, and I kind of was thinking of like video games when you find someone's like journal entries. So I wrote this whole like emotional journal entry of like over 5 years of what she had been doing, and I like sent it to him after, like I sent it to the player and he read it in between sessions, and I don't know, that was really fun. So I like doing stuff like that, and that's where I feel like I have the most fun, is doing side things.
That's really cool.
There. So yeah.
Very cool.
I think another great source is history, and I think this kind of goes with what Ray was saying. But there's quite a lot of history out there that doesn't get a lot of attention in the current genres of fantasy RPGs. And so, for example, I know that TSR back in the day took a stab at a Mesoamerican setting. It didn't really take off, but I find that setting extremely interesting. The last book I published had elements of a Mesoamerican culture in 2 different groups of people. And the whole idea was that they were warring people that didn't realize they were more alike than they were different. And one of the adventure hooks was, if the party could bring peace between these people, then they can get a bonus amount of XP and feel good about themselves, and they've done a good deed. And but history is a great place because they say truth is stranger than fiction quite often. And,
Oh yeah.
And there is quite a lot of stuff out there. And my wife introduced me to audiobooks. So I listen to a ton of audiobooks, and it's usually either like right now it's Robert Jordan, but that, or it's some sort of history. And there's a lot of interesting stuff out there that you can draw a lot of inspiration from. And I have, if you look at, like, if you ever visit one of my websites, the world history that I've written, there's a lot you can see. Oh, well, that's taken after like a Roman civilization, and this is taken after, and that's another thing. Once you delve into world building, if you can draw those lines, those connections between, say, Greece and this little civilization you're writing about, well, it puts, most people know about the ancient Greeks, and it immediately puts images already in their head, and a lot of work can be done for you without having to like sit there just typing away. Well, they like to live in large marble buildings with these columns, and you don't have to do all that because you can worry more about what's important in those cases.
It's truly what I love about this game, right? Like to hear everyone have complete, well, not even complete, but just slightly different inspiration that lead to the same goal, and just shows you that, just how special the game can be based on who you play it with, right? Like every GM is going to bring a different meal to the table, and that's really cool. And that's really what I love about it. So I was going to ask, does anyone else ever use scenes? I call them scenes, but sharing moments in a story where your characters are not there, where you're sharing it strictly for the players at the table? Or do you reside by the philosophy that if it's not the characters that I'm sharing it with, then they don't know it?
For me, we operate on 3 planes of existence: the material plane, the land of dreams, and the land of the dead. So, for instance, when I want something to be conveyed to a player, particularly one that may have a tie to the ancestry, we communicate that to the land of the dead. Or better yet, we have players that will have it in dreams. And so sequences of dreams, I'll show them, like, for instance, I'll show them images on cards and go, this is the interpretation. A lot of it is that, like, if I'm going to give something to a player, I tend to want them to be there, but if I'm going to give it to them in a way where it's like they're observing it, things like dreams, or things like specters or ghosts or ancestors telling them like, hey, don't go to this location because this is where it all ended really badly for us. You know what I mean? Things like that. So
that's amazing.
I played in a game where what you're talking about, Malcolm, where it's like it was another Curse of Strahd game. A lot of Curse of Strahd, but
I love Curse of Strahd. By the way.
It's so good.
My favorite.
Yeah, for sure.
More tears in that game than anything.
Yeah, yeah. That's where you bring the tears. So a girl that was DMing for the game I was playing in, she would do what she called preludes, and like maybe every other session she would do this cinematic scene of some other NPC doing something off screen that our PCs didn't know about, and they would be like hints for new factions that might come in, or Strahd like monologuing to himself as he stares out the window, or whatever. And I wasn't sure what to think about them at first, but the more I was like going through and remembering things and watching how she would bring them into the game later, the more I was like, that is actually really cool. And I tried to start incorporating that in my games too a little bit, but it really depends on your players, because there are some players that no matter how hard they try, they still metagame. And even if you say, please don't, they still do. But there are other ones who try really hard not to, and you can trust them with something like that. So I think it would probably depend on who my players are, and if I could trust them not to metagame and like that thing instead of accidentally cheat.
So I used to do it a lot more than, but I do it probably every 3 or 4 sessions. I'll do these things I call a cold open. I call them cold opens because on television they're called cold opens. So like, you're watching The Walking Dead and there's a scene that happens and then boom, you crash to credits. So I do those, and they usually have none of the players involved in them. They might be an NPC just talking to someone over music. And I have found that they add a little something that, and for the metagame players, usually what I have kind of set it up is if they metagame, it sets up a trap. But if they don't, it just adds more flavor to the world. Similar to what Ray does, but I like it. Ray ties in through the dream, right? Really, I'm literally saying, yeah, we're all kind of like, it's so funny that when you just mentioned that, Ray, it's like, I always say to my players, this with theater of the mind or with the game, you are the man, I've had a little bit of drink, so give me a second. You are the player controlling the character. Your character is in the story, but then you're as a player, you're also the audience watching your own story. So sometimes I like to give things to what I call the audience, which is just whoever's at the table. And so that's what those are for. But I've always wondered if other people do it. And it sounds like clearly that's really cool to hear that and hear how you do it, right? That's great.
Yes.
We have a thing in our world that we use languages a lot. So, like for instance, one of our languages that we've had with our one of our players is it's a language where she speaks it, and everything within 10 feet of her can be augmented into an illusion. So the words are not comprehensible. It's not like this word means leaf, this word means this. When she speaks, she dances, and she's like portraying like the images around her, if it's warriors, if it's this, but she doesn't speak a lot. And so like that's where the players are going, like that, they hang on things like that. And I think,
Yeah.
just a little bit of that, it's that tying it into, why should your player love it? Like, why should they get engaged with it? And I love that fact when you hit them with a dream, or you hit them with a cold open, or you hit them with something that says, pay attention. You know what I mean? Like, and it sometimes that is that stomp on the ground or hit the table or like, yeah.
And usually you use it the way is if you use it so that like that opening has nothing to do with the session, there's no way for the metagamers to latch onto it, because it probably won't come up in the session at all. It may come up 8 sessions from now or 6, and then suddenly there's this like, oh shit, do you remember that cold open where like so that's what this was about, right?
Yeah.
Like, kind of fun to do that.
And Ashley, she may not know what metagaming is.
All right.
Metagaming is where a player uses the knowledge that they have, but their character wouldn't have. So you're running a character who has no idea about a particular, like if your character, let's say, never has encountered a troll, your character may not have any idea how to defeat a troll, but the player does. And so the player knows right away to whip out the torch and light them on fire. Well, that's metagaming. Like the player.
Isn't that cheating?
That's cheating.
Yes.
Yes. So, but to Malcolm's question, I like to play with memories a lot in my current game. So one of the things I've done, and I'll put like they are right now trying to stop a calamity. They all wanted the Great Quest kind of campaign. So I put some items out there that were owned by the heroes that had defeated it previously. And when they find these items, they are overcome with the memories of the heroes that had them previously. The part of the enchantment is that they are ancestral or legacy weapons that hold that memory. And so it gives me a chance, like initially the memories are a jumble and they have to figure them out, and it comes to them maybe like in races, like in Malcolm, you may say maybe in a dream but slowly over time they unravel, and it gives me a chance to do these cinematic moments of the fight that happened previously at the opportune time, and not in a way that the players can derail it.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
That's true. Yeah, because then their players or their characters also have the knowledge of it as it's coming to them. That's a really good idea. Yeah.
I like that. Yeah.
Just to throw this out there, and something I routinely do to this day is actually I'll put images on my Instagram stories, so my players will have to go there, and it's not only just the images, but it's the music. So they have to listen to the lyrics, the music, the beat, everything else. And so that little picture, when I'm tagging the players into it, they think to themselves, it's important for our session, which it might be, but there's no me saying anything to it. It's just an image and music. Yeah.
I used to do that a lot with Curse of Strahd to set up. I knew that like this needs to be a really epic session, so I would just have just a series of images and music. And I always buy when I find yours, I'm always like, ooh, some big's coming, Ray's posting images and music. The vibes are there. This is about to go down.
Yep.
I'm a big movie. I'm a big movie, I already said, but I'm big on music too. Music is so integral to my games that probably would, I could probably DM without music. It would probably I probably have a little bit of a crutch now because I really enjoy it so much. It fuels me in the game, right? Like, so yeah, that's interesting. Do you use music in your games, Ray, or anyone else? Or
100%.
Rachel?
100%.
Yeah.
Matt? Yeah. And if so, how do you use music? What's your approach to it?
It's not super specific. Usually I'll make a playlist like before I start a campaign that seems like it has the right tone that I want. So I'll do like an ambient one and an ambient playlist and a battle playlist. And if it's a horror game, then like the scary playlist will be my third one. And then I'll just cycle between those. I love it when it seems like a song comes on that's perfect for the moment, especially if your playlist is on shuffle or something, and you're like, yes, it.
That's
but
golden.
I don't plan for it though. But I do know some DMs and it sounds like you do that too, Malcolm. I know DMs that do that, but I've never done that.
Yeah.
The
For
thing
me,
I like to use is sound effects. So the Days of Blight, the first book of Days of Blight, remember the rain? It's constantly raining.
Yeah.
It's a magical effect from the hag, right? So that it's constantly raining. Rather than me telling the party, oh, it's still raining, I had this thunderstorm soundtrack that just I had on loop. Now the party knew that anytime the rain suddenly stopped, something bad was about to happen. But I never told them the rain would stop. I would just pause the soundtrack, just pause it, and if they notice, great. If they don't notice, then bad things unfold without them, and usually it gets worse then, you know. And they caught on pretty quickly, you know. But initially they were just like, "Whoa, what just happened? Why is there's 2 kids missing, not 1?" You know, that sort of thing. They didn't do anything.
Yeah. I think soundtracks are so important. I mean, at least when I used to do face-to-face games, now keep in mind, you know, with everything going on, it's been a long time since I've done face-to-face games. But what I used to do was I'd run a speaker system. You can use JBL speakers, and you would have them on an iPad and play YouTube, whatever, and have background music. But also, I would use these small little Bluetooth speakers that are about this big and put them in my table terrain. So then when players would move up their characters, I could have pre-recorded voices of me going like, "Oh, well, what would you like to buy here?" And then I would hit that as I'm telling the story. So that all of a sudden they hear 2 voices of me going, "Okay, what the heck just happened?" And
Always next level.
Now.
Always next
level. And it's easy. They're like, I had them in my shop at one point, but they're like, I think I spent $9, $10 on these speakers. And the technology now, you can do tandem, so you can do speaker sound on the table, and it's great. Yeah, I love it. Yeah,
that's awesome.
I make too many playlists. Sometimes I obsess over playlists for games, over like sometimes like a game I'm running tomorrow, there has to be like almost like a battle. The battle music needs to be separated, but then I also need to have like ambient music. But then I also need to have those touching moment. If they die, what's playing? How I end if this happens, what song is playing, and then I always try to also find songs that aren't quite fantasy based that kind of fit the theme. So for example, one of my groups is running. I'm pretty much doing a homebrew version of Rise of Tiamat because I've already run Rise of Tiamat and I keep everything as canon. So now Tiamat's coming back, and everything my previous party did is canon, and now this group is experiencing her new rise. So at the beginning of the month, I decided to test Tiamat out and run her for a group at a bar that I'm running tomorrow. And then all the players that play in my regular campaign decided they were going to come to that. So now that was just going to be a test Tiamat, but now I was like, that has to tie in somehow. So while I was creating the playlist, this Tom York song from Suspiria, from the movie they did Suspiria, just kept like sticking with me. So I go, that's Tiamat's song. So then in one of my cold opens like 3 episodes ago, I shared that song. And one of the players who is about to fight in this battle tomorrow in that cold open, that player's from an old campaign. So there was this moment where like the person was asking me, "You guys did win that fight, right? You did win that fight." And so in that moment, using that song, now when the players tomorrow, that song will play again, and it will now be this reoccurring song when Tiamat is around, when she shows up, when the Dark Queen. So when they start to hear, it's like, oh shit, this is not good. Like, you know, so I find ways to use music like that and make it this, one of the most epic moments of using music is the Hereditary soundtrack. I remember watching that movie, and it's not a lot of notes in the music, but I kept feeling very uneasy while I watched the film. And I realized what it was is there's a lot of like low level vibrations that make you feel uneasy that are in it. And during my Curse of Strahd, where there was a TPK in Curse of Strahd, I used that music. And to this day, there was a lot of tears at that table, but the players were like, the music was so unsettling that like, and to this day, when it's recorded, it's online. Most people say they can't watch that episode. The music and the players like breaking and watching them like it all like the catastrophe.
Oh,
They're like,
no.
I can't watch that game. I can't watch that game anymore, by the way. I get no joy from it, by the way, if it sounds like I do. But like Ray said, we're looking for those moments because only from there, ever since that, when those like if your favorite book, your favorite novel, your favorite movie, whatever is your favorite media, the character's lowest moment is that moment. There's only up from there. And you need those low moments. And that sometimes what 5th edition lacks. If they don't hit a low moment, then they're just going around killing monsters. You know, like if there's, and low moments aren't always deaths. No. They could be, it's clearly other ways to exploit that. So I'm a big fan of music and gaming, clearly.
I gotta say, Hereditary and Suspiria, both great movies. Totally creepy.
Those are my horror go-tos, man.
So Ray, you mentioned building terrain, and I believe Matt shared some images with me earlier. And so I got some questions about that because what I saw looked impressive. Has that been something that you've always been interested in doing, like crafting? Just like, is it an outlet for creativity, or do you feel like that needs to be a part of the game for you?
So I'll start off that question by saying you absolutely do not need to have terrain. I think first and foremost, get them with the story and keep them with the story, because terrain, it's like gum, does really good in the first 5 to 10 minutes, and then you're going, okay, you got to keep their attention. So I think for me, back to that part, is that I love it as a creative outlet. I've always built things for my players, but I have to be very careful because sometimes if I build something and then the players go, nope, we're going left. And I look at it and go, oh no, I just spent like really 100 hours on this thing. And, you know, that can just be devastating. So I think for a lot of that is that, you know, when it comes down to the terrain piece, it's mostly for me, you know, build it, but build something they're going to use and not railroad it into, you know, you're not bringing them there to do it, but build something that's going to be useful. And the last one's going to be, you know, you can spoil your players by having terrain for every session. But what I find is that if you want a session to really stick with them, like a battle scene or like a dramatic role-playing scene or something that like, you know, like a red wedding situation, throw some terrain in there, throw some visuals, and it doesn't have to be just terrain. It could be pieces of paper, notes, it could be music, song, whatever, but it's a visual or a physical thing that can be consumed within, and it just adds more to your story. So in a rough around way, what I look at it as is it amplifies the story that you create, but you definitely don't need it to have the game or do the game. So
okay, yeah. Rachel, how about yourself? Do you find yourself using terrain often? Never? Sometimes?
Okay, so both me and my husband DM. My husband, Ray, when we won your giveaway, like, just he was in terrain heaven, like, you know, it's raining terrain around him. He's so excited. So like, I literally was like, you take all that, because that overwhelms me. It's a lot to like sort through and pick up on. So sometimes I'll actually be like, hey, husband of mine, do you want to pick out minis for me? Because I don't really want to. And so he, like, I'll just describe what I want, and he'll pick them out of his vast collection. But so no, I don't typically like using it. It's not really my creative medium. What I like to do on like a more creative medium level is I like to draw notable NPCs and show them what they look like. Sometimes if a scene happens that I felt was really meaningful, I'll draw the scene and then show my players later. Or sometimes I'll just draw the actual like player characters. So that's kind of how I end up contributing creatively is through that. But I appreciate the terrain game, and when I see pictures of everyone's setups, I'm usually very much in awe, and I love it. So
very cool. Malcom, how about yourself?
Yeah, I am not I can craft, but I don't. often give myself the time to craft that I would like. When I look at people like Ray, it's just, wow. Because so I end up, I've built by purchasing most of, my terrain for the tabletop, but by no means is it necessary. It has come literally, it doesn't come because I need it for the game. It really comes because there's something that Malcom needs. Malcom feels like he needs to have this tree because like the scene needs to be this way. And then Malcom sets it up and then Malcom doesn't use it and goes, I spent 3 hours setting all this stuff up. So I've gotten smarter, and now I might build 1 or 2 things. The best thing for me is to know when an episode, if it's a campaign-based game, if an episode ends somewhere, I know they're going to pick up there, or I know it's starting with a combat, then I can build that out and have it as a visual. But sometimes it's like, sometimes it's more hassle than it's worth to really lean on terrain. Ray's advice and Rachel's advice are very sound. I will say that, again, with playing online, using a lot of things as simple as, changing a background, and showing them who they're facing or what this is. I often use also a lot of, I start using a snap filter, which is literally what all the little TikTokers are using, but I use it at the game and it gives it purpose. Whereas if I want the NPC to be really menacing, or I want that monster to actually be a ghost, I can change my whole face. It'll just put this thing over, and it allows me to really get into the role play because I'm no longer staring at Malcom right there. I am the god, or I am that dragon. I am whatever that is, and you have to be silly. And I think one of the biggest things about being a GM is being willing to be as silly as possible with yourself. Like a lot of your players don't expect your players. What I say is don't expect your players to do the silly voices and stuff, but do them for them. Even if you don't do accents and stuff, because that just helps them feel more immersed, and they're going to feel more welcome and more comfortable at the table, just even role playing. And that role playing is just them saying, hey, my character does this. It doesn't mean they have to, do critical role stuff. But the more you can be the person that says, hey, I'm here for a good time. I'm just in here being silly too. That allows them to go all in, with you.
Definitely. I was going to say too, I know like if you're going to do it online, terrain is a whole different thing. I know I have a friend who he DMs pretty regularly, and his favorite thing to do is to make like a base map, online. I think, there's Dungeon Draft is one of them. Just kind of like the more simple programs, but then he has Photoshop, and he likes to go back, take the map in Photoshop. He'll add a bunch of like special effects. So like if there's like a radioactive vat of something, he'll like add glowing effects in Steam, and like he adds all this extra stuff on top of his map. So and he spends hours on it, just making it like perfect, exactly how he envisioned. And then suddenly it's not like kind of a simple map you made in Dungeon Draft with like only the few things they give you, which it is a lot of things, but just the few things. Now he's made it like customized his own for online players, which I thought was always really cool.
So cool.
I used Photoshop to make my own dungeon tiles.
Yeah.
Specific to what I'm doing. I bought a ton of dungeon tiles off of Drive-Thru RPG, and none of them are ever exactly what I need, but I found through Photoshop you can create your own ruin city or whatever. And you can make them up as modular as you need to reuse them, and that way they're not a one-shot pony, which always sucks when it comes to terrain.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I push for modularity in building terrain, just because it's that you want to avoid I spent 400 hours and only got to do 10 minutes of role play through this thing. Because I remember my good friend Ash Pepperina, she painted, like she spent like a good 100 hours painting a boat, and in my head I was like, that whole campaign's going to be on a boat at that point.
It's like put it in like one scene. I've literally done that. But there's moments where I do that too, where I get like super obsessive, and I'm like, they're gonna start in Waterdeep, and I know they're just gonna role play there, and I know there's not gonna be a fight, but I just want to build this entire scene out just so they can see it, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
very just
I
Mr. Rogers
saw
neighborhood.
something. Oh, I saw something the other day, which I thought was really cool because now that we use Zoom a lot for, I use Zoom for my online groups and I use PowerPoint to like run the background stuff. But I thought it was really cool because they did a video of, I saw this video where they did it where at the perspective or point of view of the person riding a stagecoach. So you see like,
Oh.
you see like the forest going this direction, and then you put the soundtrack of like clopping feet, and then it's like, now your travel goes from, okay, let's do wandering monster checks to, for the next 30 minutes, you guys will be wandering through this woods. Let me show you what you see. And then you have this in your Zoom background as a video. And it's
That's
like, they
pretty
just,
cool.
yeah, they
That's
see
cool,
that.
yeah.
Then you throw in the horse sounds, and all of a sudden
Yeah.
it's like, now you get your players talking road banter. And I'm like, I'd rather hear that than go, okay, let's roll a D6 and see if you get the wandering
See if
monster,
you, yeah.
Mhm.
They noticed the werewolves outside the windows.
Exactly. And it's that where then you can like, if someone says, I want to see the back or see the werewolf, you can throw the audio of a wolf howling or something like that. It's, or even then while they're doing I've done this a lot with sound, and just to add a little bit to that, where you have a player that, says, I want to look out the window or I want to inspect this, and don't break their stride. Just play the wolf sound and let them keep talking.
Yep.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, little things like that. Yeah.
Totally
Ugh.
works. I love
Ugh.
doing that stuff.
So, Ashley, what else you got for these guys?
Well, let me see here. So, I'm sure that you each have like a most memorable and favorite game that you have mastered. Do you guys feel like you're trying to continue to live up to that standard? Do you feel like you're trying to advance beyond that? How do you feel about that? Matt, let's hear what you gotta say.
Every single time I start a new campaign, I always think to myself, I can never live up to that last one. I'll never do it. And then as the game goes
Each
on,
game?
each campaign, so each new string of adventures that the party is gonna set out on, I always feel like I can never live up to that. And then like I think what you're getting at is like maybe at a session level, like do you have to feel like you have to live up to the great session? And there are always going to be those sessions that are kind of what I call kind of in between sessions that are setting up something else, and those are necessary, but they can still be fun for the players. Like the players don't necessarily need to know that you're sweating hoping that they're still interested. There is but to me I really want my players to enjoy the game every time, but I also want to enjoy the game every time, and I get enjoyment when I see my players squirming and sweating it out, and they get enjoyment when they rise to the level of overcoming that whatever was causing them to squirm. So sometimes that's a tightrope, like pushing an encounter to the, like, I know that there are certain encounters I want to be almost deadly, and that is a very fine rope to walk,
Almost.
Just Sunday we had one where at the end of it everyone was all smiles, and like we had one person was flat out unconscious, another person was at 4 hit points, another one was at 2 hit points, and then the rogue, who had been yet to even be hit in the entire campaign, was like well below half, and everyone was just like all smiles, just all chattering once they got out of the situation, and they didn't even like accomplish the goal that they set out to do, but they were just happy to have survived. And that is like a success, because now they're like, they hate the villain even more because he was there and he caused all this consternation and he got away. So it's one of those things where those are sessions I love.
I think I need to rephrase my question there. So like, if you guys have a campaign as a whole that you completed, that's like your favorite campaign that you ever mastered. Do you feel like you're trying to live up to that, or is it something that you're like, huh, that's as good as it's ever gonna get, and I'm just gonna have fun now?
Yeah, I think with anything, you're always kind of chasing the high of that one. I think Ray's been playing the same campaign for 20 years, so I don't even know. That's amazing. Like for me, I go in these waves where like most of my campaigns they usually have an ending at about a year to a 2 year mark, and then they come to a close. I will probably say that I'm chasing moments from my first campaign with my closest friends, where a lot of the times the moment is just like Matt said, I like seeing them uncomfortable because I love the payoff when they finally rise to the occasion. And I just, without telling a long story, I remember this one moment that for me, from my first campaign, is without knowing all this backstory, they were fighting a villain, and one of the players sacrificed himself. And we used to play these really long marathons where we've been playing like 10 hours of D&D. And at that point, you're really in it at 10-hour mark, right? And so it's 3 a.m, and one of the players sacrifices and he dies. So at 3 a.m, they all go home, and no one even pretty much says bye to me. They're all like, leave my house. And it's kind of like, man, F you, Malcolm, like I do like it. And I remember knowing that there was a chance that he wasn't dead because he kind of like fell into the darkness. It was kind of like the Luke Skywalker. He just kind of fell off and just disappeared into the deep. And he went on to play another character for like another 6 or 7 sessions, but eventually we had devised a way to bring the character back. And the moment is not that the character came back. The moment is that everybody had been playing with the same friend across the table. But when his old character came back, they all literally reached over and grabbed him and hugged him. And I was like, he never went anywhere. Like the person playing, Eddie, never went anywhere. But when they brought the character back, there was a reunion, and there was a moment I had to stop the moment there and give them 5 minutes just to like be like, thank you. I'm so happy you're back. And those moments don't come unless that moment have happened where he sacrificed himself, right? So that's where it's that give. So that is always that's probably a high in that first campaign that I'm always chasing.
That's great.
Yeah.
Great story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go for it, Ray.
So I guess for me, let's see. It's rather difficult because I've been playing the same campaign for the entire time, and so I have to pick out the moments for me. Like for instance, for me, it's trying to push myself to be better than the last couple of months, I guess. If I want to put myself in quarters, like different depending on that story. And the reason why I push myself, because I always look at it like your players are coming to the table and going to spend 4-10 hours with you, and you want to set the bar to like what game they're coming into. So I think for me, have I had any really emotional moments? Yes. Absolutely. We've had games where, like, a good example of that for me right now is we call the Festival of Fates. There's a ceremony that happens, and I run about 4 to 6 games a week. And so with those players, like, we have a ton of players that cycle through. And so at the end of the session, they are able to say their goodbyes to the players or NPCs or even PCs that they have ran into. But reason why I try to better myself with that is that, they know this happens every year, every real world time year. So it's not just, today we're going to do a festival. So they know that they're going to come into this. And so I have to push this by like being good on my descriptions, using music to kind of engage them, using different things like if players come in and allow them to talk to the dead, what has the dead been thinking about? What do they want to say their goodbyes to? And just fill that in with so much description. So the point where I look at the player, that they really do feel engaged, or they really feel comfortable enough to go, you know what, I'll use my good friend Thomas and Ashley Pepperina. We were playing a session and 4 out of the 6 players are full on ugly crying. And it's one of those sessions where you're going, as a DM, do you stop and let people take the break? And as for me, I keep going, because if it's one of those things where you just churn through and it's not a bad cry, it's a really good cry for them. And because they've gone through this campaign with you, and it's just like that's how I try to better myself, is to find ways to creatively engage them, find ways to make the story so interesting that they want to keep coming back. And I'll get off my soap, but as far as one of the things I've learned, at least as far as using a new way to engage my players, I use incense burners that can be controlled with a remote control. And what I found is that you don't have to put incense in them. You can put any scent in them. And so if you want to engage scent at the table, hit that button. All of a sudden you're talking about a tavern that smells like Italian food, or you're talking about a battle that smells like, you can smell the iron coming off of the shield and the sword, and putting things in there that will radiate that aroma. I mean, there's things that you can do to engage your players, but I try to push myself because it's, why not?
How does one play at a table with you, Ray? Just asking for a friend, like.
So it's always that, right? I've got odd. What was that when I had Keith and Macy and like a lot of my friends that came over, some of the people from different areas of and so when they sat down, we have a table with all the terrain. I've got speakers playing music. I've got the speakers playing background music. I've got the table speaking to you. I've got incense burners going off. I've got lights in different directions that are pointing. But I think the best part about that, regardless of what I bring to the table, if my story isn't engaging, this is worth nothing.
Yes.
This is worth nothing. Some of the best DMs I've learned and been able to be a pleasure at a table, all they've ever used were graph paper and marbles. And I look at that and I go, there was more. I would spend hours on those stories and just kind of going, how did you do that without a single background thing? And I looked at it and I go, the best way to do it is grab them with that. You know what I mean? Make them. It's those simple elements that I think we all kind of seek out, is that connection to your character, connection between characters, connection to the world, all these things. Give them a reason to care.
Yeah.
So
that's great.
Rachel, you use incense burners, Rachel?
I don't. Well, yeah, and I DM'd more and more after COVID hit, so it's mostly been online stuff. I feel like I'm still in such kind of a learning curve because I'm still in those first few years of DMing, that I do feel like I have a campaign that I did the best at. Like I have like a top 2 or 3 that I'm like, I think I did really good with these. And then there's others I don't like as much, and I don't feel like I did a good job. But I do feel pretty hopeful when I go into a campaign where it's like, I still have so much to learn. I'm pretty sure I will keep improving, especially, just with practice comes improvement automatically. So I'm not worried I hit my peak just yet. So.
I think my most memorable moment came from, my top 3 most memorable moments were all where I sat back and let the party, they were kind of not always on the same page with each other. And I found, because I used to run extremely large tables, like 10 players. And they, when you have that big of a table, they tend to carve themselves off into little cliques, and I'll always remember there were this one campaign, it ran for like 4 years, and somewhere around year 3.5, one party member was like, they decided that this particular artifact they were trying to figure out how to dispose of before anyone else could get it wasn't worth it anymore. Too many people had died for this thing, and he handed it over to a villain. And one guy was like, "What just happened?" And he got up and he left and just peeled out in his car. And another person, it was like, and then they all came back to the table and they were just like, "What do we do? What do we do?" And it was, the player that handed it over was legitimately felt like they had a stretch, because things had gotten so hairy during this time that like 3 player characters had died in the span of 4 weeks. And he was just like, this just isn't worth it anymore. Like, we're all dying and no one's going to survive and we're going to lose anyway, And they were all like, "We're gonna lose anyway because you handed it over," you know. But those are the moments, like for me, that are the most memorable. I don't know if anyone. This might be a new question. I don't know. Has anyone here run an evil campaign?
Yeah.
I just want to relate this, and then I'll shut up. I that same campaign I ran concurrent with an evil campaign with a different group, and they were supposed to, at the finale, wasn't going to be me running the big bad villain. It was going to be, they met on a Saturday, and neither group realized the other existed.
Yep.
And they were going to meet on a Saturday and collide, like the two worlds were going to collide, and that was going to like decide the fate. And one of the players of the evil campaign, like I was trying to figure out how to make, because evil campaigns have a tendency to go off the rails, and people just getting, oh, I can just do whatever I want. I'm just going to be chaotic evil, regardless of what my alignment is. You know, they're just going to go crazy. Well, I decided, well, what could I do to keep people on the same page and kind of keep it serious? And my thought was, well, what if I constructed an evil so evil that even the evil characters would be like, I'm not on board with that. Well, the only one that wasn't on board with that was this one player who went along with it for until they were sure what was going to happen. And then they were like, I need to tell someone about this because this is bad. And the rest of the party realized what they were going to do. And there was this hunt. We normally would end at like 7 or 8 at night. And we played till like 2 o'clock in the morning because they were trying to, like, this player was trying to escape this temple, and the rest of the party was trying to hunt him down and stop her before she got away. And it was the most intense situation I think I've had at the table. And I just sat back, you know, like, you guys have at it, you know, and she got away. And it was at that point where she figured out, wait, there's another group on Thursday nights? Wait a minute. And so she joined, her evil character joined the group on Thursday nights. And that's when it was like full speed ahead to the end at that point.
Oh, yeah. I actually allow my players to play big bad evils. And so just to throw that out there, right now we have about, I'd say about right now, active players, roughly about 30 to 40 of them. And so there'll be a player in there that I will completely allow to play big bad evil, and they'll use things like politics, they'll use conversations. The other part is to it as well is I don't allow insight checks on players. So if a player goes, you know, I'm just going to tell them this, it's a blatant lie. It's up to the player to look at him and go, I need to know if this is a lie or not.
Yeah.
So things like that. But I think, and just, you know, I wanted to get your thoughts on this too, Malcolm. What was your troubles, or just anybody actually, what was their troubles running evil campaigns? For me, you know, I'm a big believer that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. But just like they are allowed to do evil things upon the world will always respond in kind. And so that's the other part. It's like, if you get this player that's like, I'm gonna murder hobo a village, eventually those villagers are going to get some money together and be able to hit back just as hard, if not do it worse, by saying every time this person goes in there, we're going to charge them $300 to sleep, we're going to charge them $800 to eat, you know, things like that. And you're just going, eventually, you know, you curb the things. But I ran into that a lot. It was, you know, they thought that they could do a lot of evil to the thing, like, and just be with zero punishment.
Yeah, I like to joke with my players in most groups I play with that all D&D campaigns are villain campaigns, because when you think about some of the tendencies that parties will do early on and the actions that they will take in the framework of thinking that they are righteous, right? Look, you look at the paladin, right, who just thinks, just because I worship this god, I should just murder anybody or take them down or just haul them off to, just because this is my code of justice. And in my games, that I usually try to show them that could easily bite you in the butt at the end of the day. And so when I ran a villain campaign, it was the same thing. It was Ray. It was like, how do I make a villain who is so nasty they don't even want to do this anymore? Like they thought they wanted the villain campaign till they met the villain who was, and they were like, no, I don't want to. I don't think we want to really go here. It's kind of hard without going into all the stories and stuff, right? But I think with another one, I did what Matt was talking about, where we ran Curse of Strahd, and I had filled out my hero group who was trying to fight Strahd, and people kept wanting to play the game. So Strahd hired on Adventures or villain group. Yeah. So the way I kept them under check is that they were always under like Strahd's thumb. But what I noticed about my villains, they all respected Strahd, and they didn't like him, but they all knew that they could die any day. My heroes always just kind of like gave him the middle finger all the time, and were always pushing the issue, and never thought they brought that like high fantasy, I can kill a dragon into Barovia, and I was like, that's gonna get you killed, you know. And it was supposed to be at one point them working towards this face-off, but the heroes started to make really easy mistakes, knowing that Strahd had this other group working for them. And so at one point they found themselves at a point where they were camped out in the winery, the Articol's winery, and the other group ambushed them. So when the ambush happened, like 7 other players start popping on. After Strahd is burning the place down, there's like, there's blights running all over the place, and now they're coming. The other characters are coming in, just fireballing them. And they're just like, Malcom, why are you letting this happen? And so I'm like, and so what's funny is Strahd, I would start playing them all against each other. I was telling the villain group as Strahd, this is what I want you to do, because I want to break the heroes. I want them at their lowest level. And so then when they almost TPK'd them, Strahd shows up and then chastises the villain group on camera, like, why would you do this? Did I tell you to do this? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, no, I didn't. I didn't tell you to kill anybody. And so I just like causing that kind of chaos and that
chaos. Yeah.
Strahd is trying to woo both parties into kind of some form of submission, right? So from there, Strahd like whisks this whole group back to his castle to kind of wine and dine them after like beating them up, like after almost killing them, right? So yeah, I love it. It could be a lot of fun if you just, but you never let the villains there should always be a villain bigger than them, right? That can like rein them in, at any given moment. So yeah.
Rachael, are you going to run an evil campaign now?
I don't know. I'm that type of person where like, even when I play a video game, I can't do the evil run through. Like, I'm like, I can't, it's so hard. Like, I feel bad, even though I know it's like fake. So I'm not sure if I would ever get there. And I know some people actually might think this pretty controversial, and I make sure it's okay with my players before I ask them and we can talk it out. But usually I even ask my players, can you please make sure your characters are neutral or good aligned? Because if they're too evil, I just don't know how I can run that yet. I don't feel like I'm at that level where I could adapt, just you running and killing everybody, or whatever they end up feeling like they need to do. So yeah, I don't know. It is interesting hearing you guys' experiences though, and like how it could work. Because yeah, you're right. I guess if like everyone's all united against someone that's way worse, then you still have that teamwork aspect, and you're not having people, they're all the worst together and not separate, which I guess is what counts. So
one of the most controversial things I've ever done, I don't even really speak about this session that often, but is
secret.
It was a cyberpunk game, and the players just kept they were on the villain campaign tip, right? So they were kind of, well, what's funny is it really wasn't. They had signed up for villain campaign, but the way it was set up is they weren't just bad guys. They were just kind of ruffians, right? They were just taking highest bidder jobs and things like that. And up to a certain point, they got wooed by this like corporate exec who was like, hey, I can give you everything you want. Like some of the characters' families were really poor. And so suddenly they start making credits. They start making money hand over fist. And so at one point on the news and the media kept saying that there was this group out there, these rebels that needed to be snuffed out. And so when the corporate people came to them and was like, I need you to do this mission. One thing I've noticed about this group is they kill everything. I'd be like, do you need to kill that guy? I'm killing him. He's got to go. So I set them on this mission to kill the rebels. So now they're like, this is it. We get to go in there and wipe them. We've been hearing about them all this time. They've been causing all this trouble. They've been bombing the city. And what they didn't know is they had secretly, when they had accepted their contracts several episodes ago, they had little implants, little chips put in their head. So they rush into this building and start killing all of the rebels. And I kept having them do insight checks. And I kept saying, you notice that guard is fully armed, but he's running away. He's not firing back. What do? I'd gun mow him down. Okay. And then I noticed. And so they were, oh, nat 20, kill him. How do you do it? I'm doing it this way. So then suddenly when they get to the top of this 3-story structure and they fight the boss, which is like this giant mech, it's a police mech. And all like the SWAT team have come in. And they've literally been terrorists. They've been on a shooting spree in like what essentially was like a mall. And that was like, I mean, it's a pretty controversial topic, but I wanted to like bring in the idea that you guys are just trusting. You guys are so trusting in the idea that you're the heroes here. You're actually the full-on bad guys. And they end up being arrested. They end up going on trial and they end up being, but I'm not afraid to go there in a game if the players have made that sign that we're okay to go there, right? Because that's where stories go.
I love morally gray villains.
Yeah.
All the way. All the way. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, those moments where you can just I love because sometimes it is like the player's actions. A good example is if they repair a dam, but that in that repairing, destroys a village somewhere else. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And the player goes, oh, I wanted to be that village is the one that it destroys. So when they come together, it's literally one player meeting another, but the other one's like, you're my big bad. And I'm literally doing this so I can get close to you and I will strike when it is ready because you didn't give my family the opportunity to do this, nor will I give it to you. And so then all of a sudden, who's the big bad? It's like, that's the part that I love. And then all of this drama is set in the background of, it's a fair,
Yeah. This fair sounds like the most epic place ever. Like I just want to be like, this fair. I love it. Yeah, man.
Yeah.
I need to be in one of these tearjerker Ray games for sure.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Yeah.
Are your players all are they all rotating in, Ray? Are they because you run 4 to 6 games a week, so I've never understand. Are you setting which group can play on certain weeks? Is that kind of
So basically what I do is that I tell my groups that I will be available if I say Friday at 5 o'clock is a game, Saturday 8 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, 5 o'clock. Okay. The groups get together every Monday we do this and they roll a D100 to see who gets to choose. Now if somebody grabs a slot, which they'll go, oh, I'll grab Friday. So normally they've spoken to their players groups and said, hey, can you join us on that Friday? Sometimes they can't. And so what happens is you'll get, a group of players that show up on that Friday, and all of a sudden you'll get 1 or 2 stragglers that go, hey, we'd love to join your game. And someone goes, yeah, come on in, come join our game. So now it's 2 new players. Yeah.
Is this all through Discord, the way you manage it?
All through Discord. All through Discord.
That's amazing.
So for us, since we call it the hovel. Every Monday, all the players join in. Sometimes we'll have 20, sometimes we'll have 30, depending on that. And sometimes we'll have only 10, but they join in and then we all roll. And so it is literally them vying for the 4 slots that I put available. And it really gets to them to say, okay, and this is usually a really good point where the players go, hey, we got a Friday, and all of a sudden you'll get a whole handful of people that are like, we want to play, but we don't know where to come in. And so they go, okay, we got some time. Come with us on a Saturday morning. Come with us on So for me, I don't got to schedule crap. I just go, this is when I'm available. I ain't coming unless this.
But then how do you deal with what characters are going to be at the table? Like what happens when you end a session and that one character needs to be in the next session?
This is perfect. Yep, this is perfect. So
and then another player fills their slot.
Yeah. So now you have 4 players, right? So now the person that grabs that slot says, hey, I'm bringing the following people, and it could be 6 people, right? And all of a sudden somebody goes, oh, well, John can't or Malcolm can't make it. All of a sudden they go, well, we really need a fighter, or we really need a ranger. And a person goes, I can be that ranger. Okay. Ranger shows up. Let's just say we get him in there, but and this is a huge but, that group has to outweigh the benefit and the consequence. The benefit is they could be replacing Malcolm and getting a ranger. The consequence is that could be an assassin, that can be a big bad evil, that can be another player that through negotiations that may have paid another person to say, hey, on Monday in the hovel, I don't want you to be in that game. I need to be in that game because there's a $10,000 contract I need to execute on this other player. So it is a balancing game by every sense of imagination. Yeah, it is. And it's, that's how we do it.
I really think your level, that is a level of, D&T where you take it to like a different, it's such an interesting concept, a way to run the game. It is definitely next level. It's so cool.
It's a different, I mean, at least in my perspective, it's a sandbox game, but then what you're essentially doing, and what makes our game very different, is we don't have preset groups. And what I mean by that, let me reinforce this. A player joins in and doesn't come with 4 other friends and goes, I want to start your game. They're an individual person. And so when they grab a Friday slot, it's really, why should the other players be there with you? Vis-a-vis also, let's say you're adventuring with that group for like 6 months, which happens a lot. They'll stay together for 6 months, but they're with each other because they want to be with each other, or they're with each other because they're pushing each other's story mutually. But at any time, a player can go, you know what? I really don't like the way this game is run, or I don't really like the way this game is kind of going for my taste. I want to take a little bit of an easier approach, and they can just go and join another group. And I'm going, my only thing I ever have to do is go, how did you get there?
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, and that's very similar to like my concept of like the way my games work until they turned into campaigns where everybody just kind of like was like, okay, this is our group now, right? Like I ran a group for a year where players were kind of coming and going, and then finally those 7 players just stuck. They just like stuck, and we're like, we're gonna be here every time. That's cool. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
Ashley, do you have other questions? I don't want to take away because you've got a lot of good ones here today.
I can't come up with any other questions at the moment.
All right. Well,
I have a question for Ash. I have a question. Yeah. I was going to say, what is the one thing that you fear the most with this, like getting behind the screen?
With the what behind the screen?
What is the one thing that you fear the most getting behind the screen, like getting behind the DM screen?
Honestly, nothing. I mean,
that's perfect.
I wouldn't say that I have a fear of anything necessarily getting behind the screen, as you put it. It's just something that, as I'm hearing from you guys and from the previous shows, that it's something that, I mean, it's great to hear how passionate you all are about the game, and that's exciting for me because it's something that, I mean, I've known about, and I've played like a couple of games back in high school. And I don't know, it's more exciting for me than it is fearful, for sure.
Perfect.
That's awesome.
Perfect.
Yeah. Ray took like that's a perfect question. I was going to ask Rachel, what are you running right now?
I'm actually on a bit of a break. I finished up Dragon Heist last, actually. Okay. And it was a great time. I did enjoy it. It was almost so open, and it was a little hard to keep track of. And
it's a little crazy.
Yeah, and like I have a thing I've noticed where, and I'm sure you guys will agree with me just because I feel like everyone has said it. Either you're kind of like a natural player, you're a natural DM, and you like one a lot better over the other. So I tend to like playing more than I like DMing. So like I'm in like 3 or 4 games that I play in, and I could do that very easily. But DMing is a little, it's really fun and I enjoy it, but it definitely, I think, takes a lot more out of me. So you guys are talking about DMing like 4 to 6 games a week sometimes, or whatever you guys are saying. And I was like, I don't know how you guys do that. I have all the admiration though, because that is really cool. But yeah, so I think next I would like to either finish up Days of Blight 3, because I did run 1 and 2 with a group, or I want to try and do Curse of Strahd, but with the new campaign setting book that came out, I really would like to incorporate a lot of that in there and make it a lot bigger.
I want to revisit that
last time. Yeah, like there's so many cool concepts and different things that you could do, and so that's in the running for me, I think, in the future. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that. I love Curse of Strahd. I want to revisit that world Barovia again too. In our game, Strahd is no more, and for the time being, one of the players took his place. So if we revisit that player's character, Creus will be the owner of Barovia.
Oh, that's so cool. I was trying to get my players to do that, and they didn't do it.
And the castle is gone. The castle went through a portal, and is actually my players don't. I'll tell them to watch this. They can watch it. It's fine. But the castle's the castle's in my Theros campaign, but it's like somewhere at the edge of Theros. Like jammed on the side, like, you know, where the waters run off. So all of Strahd's treasures and stuff are just there because he tried to transport it to the material plane and it kind of got lost in our last episode. So the other player is now trying to rebuild. He's literally walking in Strahd's shoes, but he's from Eberron. So he's literally trying to erect like flying ships and stuff, but in Barovia.
Oh,
so
fun.
I've always been like, I'd love to go
fun.
Back to Barovia and see what Eberron's Barovia is.
Yeah.
We have fun with all that. It is literally like that MCU approach to the way we game, and because for me it's like, as silly as concepts sound for me as a DM, I'll be like, I don't want that. If the players want it and if they want it enough, I'm like, who's this for at the end of the day? I'm gonna let them do it, right? I'm gonna let them at least try it, right? Whether they succeed or not. And if they succeed, it usually just makes for more cool world building, you know.
Yeah.
And you know, and I love the idea of doing full homebrew. And one day I do want to like start, but I love the idea that this game has been around, you know, Tabletop's been around for so long, and there's so many really good writers who've written all these great modules. I consider myself a director since I love film. It's like I take scripts and I tear them apart, I make them my own, but it's like I want to experience what these people have put together and try to read what you and try to interpret it and give it life and do it justice, right? And that's kind of like the joy I get out of like running the modules and tearing them apart and stuff.
Yeah. And there's been there's so many cool resources I've found on like Reddit and different things for the different modules that have been published, of like different angles you can go within that, even with different NPCs, or I think there's a few that's like they do like Curse of Strahd revamped or rewritten or something like that, or they had a whole like dragon heist thing where they managed, you know, in the actual module there's 4 villains that you can choose from, but someone had rewritten the whole thing so it included all 4 villains. So you go through and you face all of them instead of having to pick one. So it's like there's a lot of really cool ways that people and resources that other people have done to like enhance what's already there, which I really like, being able to look through all of them and then pick and choose what I like and then mash it all on my own thing. So that's been really fun.
100% agree.
Yeah.
So before we lose Ray, because he's only got like 10 minutes, I wanted to know if you guys had a favorite non-D&D RPG.
Alien RPG, 100%.
And that's mine as well. Both.
That's mine as well. What the
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I've never played it.
And then after that, Tales from the Loop after that. But I don't know if you guys run that one, but yeah.
Oh, the feeling of being like a space marine, you know what I mean? Like that, or just having to, be a scientist or something like that on that. And just the thought that one of those alien creatures can come out is, I love that game. I love it.
Is that the one where everyone dies like all the time?
Yeah.
Or am I thinking of a different one?
It's easy to die.
It's very easy to die.
Okay, I think someone's told me about a few rounds they've done, and I felt like every time they told me about their weekly session, they're like, yeah, someone else died. So I think that's the same one.
As a GM or a game mother, I actually I wasn't really interested in the cinematic games, which is kind of like one shots. as they would define them. I really wanted to put together a campaign, and so I have everything aliens, graphic novels, books, everything, and I went through and I cherry picked all. It was my last campaign I was running with my group back in Illinois, so I just cherry picked everything that I thought would go in neatly, and it was probably, and maybe it's because it was so different, but it was like one of the greatest times we had as a group. We've been together for 20 years, you know.
Yeah.
And that game is so intense. It is so intense, but it is very hard to run a campaign because the xenomorph has such a integral role to play in the game, though there are there are a number of different angles to that game that go well beyond the alien.
Yeah.
The corporate intrigue and piracy and so on and so forth. And it's such a good game. And I just got an email that the One Ring second edition, my Kickstarter just shipped today.
Ooh.
So that is
That's
a fantasy
fun.
using the Free League rules.
Free League stuff is, like Chef's Kiss on like, it's low rules, D6 dice. It's something that I love. I love my 5e, but sometimes you can just take all that extra overhead away and just roll some dice when you need to. And it really allows you to get into the story, and it really allows the DM to build tension, still gives everybody agency. It's really well crafted. All their games are like that and very similar to that. Matt, I like to do, so with the Alien games, I actually run the cinematic. I actually ran a lot of the cinematic games. I would kind of allow myself to make these one-off Alien stories, but then eventually I run the campaigns as kind of like short, like a mini series, so like 6 or 7 sessions. But what I do enjoy in those is that you can explore the world, and I usually don't bring an xenomorph in until like the second to last session, and suddenly they're fighting xenomorphs, and that one was pretty cool because my players had already played the other ones where they was like, oh, we're always dying, and then they got to get really, really comfortable with their characters, and it's like, oh no, now I like the characters and it was great. It's so good.
It's such a great
Can't recommend it enough to you, Ashley and to Rachel, if you like the Alien world, if you like the original movies, or
Yeah, they're all right.
yeah.
I've never seen them. I'm
Oh,
so sorry.
I'll act like I didn't.
I know.
It's okay. It's all right.
My wife had never seen them until we played the game, and then she wanted to watch
There you go.
every movie. She wanted to read every novel, and she immersed herself into it. It's so good.
Now, if you love
Oh, my
Stranger
goodness.
Things or Goonies or E.T., the same rules. You can build similar tension, but Tales from the Loop or Things from the Flood, great Free League game system. Something I've really loved about that is like players get to play 13-year-old, 11-year-old versions of themselves.
That's fun.
And that has been a blast, and some really, really touching stories, because also in that game specifically, Tales from the Loop, which is very cinematic in that it allows the dungeon master to craft scenes, and it allows players to craft scenes. So in between a dungeon master or game master scene, the game master can say, well, what are you guys doing? We're picking up this scene is completely on you all. What are you doing on your Saturday? Where are you at? So on my players in my group, they always in every session always go to because this is space in the 80s. They always go see an 80s film in every session. And they RP trying to figure out which movie they're going to go see. They RP going to the cinema, and I kind of like RP, but that's their scene, one of their major scenes in almost every episode, or a scene with their parents, and then like I might throw something in there, like they find out the parents, house is being foreclosed on or something like that. But like it's such a cool game. Like it's really worth picking up.
I was because I was gonna say my favorite, it sounds really similar. I've never heard of what you just said, but I don't know if you guys have heard of City of Mists.
Oh no.
So it's sort of like that, where it's set in like kind of a more modern day city. The game I played in was set in like a 1980s high school, so he kind of put the setting in kind of what you were saying, where you're kind of kids and you have your parents and role playing out stuff like that. But the general idea is, yeah, it's very cinematic. You set up your own scenes. The players can say stuff that they did, and the DM can kind of play off that, or the DM crafts these like elaborate things, and very minimal dice rolling. But when it counts, it counts. But the idea is you have your logos part of yourself, which is you, or your whatever your character is, that's like the human part, and then you have a mythos part of yourself that is basically a being of myth or legend, whichever you like, a historical figure, or like, you know, you could even do a Greek god, like let's say Zeus, and that is a part of you, and it's almost like a struggle of your logos will start feeling more and more like Zeus, maybe even getting his powers and inheriting character traits. And it's like there's a balance there of, are you going to keep yourself, or are you going to let Zeus take over your body more and more? The more you let Zeus take over your body, you get his powers, but then you lose yourself. So it's like a constant balance. It's really fun though, like set in modern times.
That sounds cool.
Yeah, so I had a lot of fun with that one. It's a good one.
Check it out.
All right. Ray, do you have to drop?
Yep, I do. Thank you for the time, everybody.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed the conversation. Yeah.
It was super fun getting to
course.
know you.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun.
I'm a huge fan of your art. That's what I was saying. I used to look at your character pictures, and so I totally follow you. I was a huge fan. So
Oh, thank you so much.
If I'm not
I loved all
following you,
your
Rachel, I will
DMs.
be now.
Yeah.
Oh, yay, that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and I've been a huge fan of your terrain and all your stuff.
oh,
so,
thank you.
yeah,
Thank you.
It's really nice.
What's your handle, Rachel?
It's Pip 400
Pip
Arts.
400? Okay.
Mhm.
Isn't there an underscore in there somewhere?
Oh,
Yeah.
you guys have a great night.
Yeah, you too.
I'm already following. Yeah. Good.
Oh, yay,
my
perfect.
gosh. Yeah, just put the face of the art. Oh my gosh, this is awesome. Yeah. Very cool.
So Ashley, I can't promise that I'll have any incense burning at your house. You're welcome to when I run a game for you.
I got my own instance. No worries there.
But I can promise that what beer were you drinking tonight? What were you drinking tonight?
Unfortunately, no beer, but I do have a mix of tequila and some apple juice. Is that weird? I don't care, but that's what I have.
Hey, whatever.
We have a little brewery by us, about 30 minutes from us, Abita Brewing. This was Purple Haze Raspberry Lager, and that's good. It's good. I picked up the assortment pack, so there's like a bunch of different stuff in there. So we'll try a different one every the shows going forward. But
I like it.
I always, we were talking about music earlier, and it got me thinking about a player, one of my dear friends, but could be annoying as hell. He would, if someone were to cast daylight and a monster were to be blinded, he would go on there, where's Manfred Mann? And then he'd be playing Blinded by the Light, or whatever. Or the Final Countdown was a frequent one. But he would rope in music that was so inappropriate to break the mood at the moment, so joke players, he made jokes about everything, and he just couldn't help himself. And you never dared to tell him to stop, because the more you told him to stop, the more he would do it.
Yeah.
So he was very oppositional in that way, but he's a very good friend. So I could never, have you ever, Malcolm or Rachel, had a difficult player that you've had to rope in and put in a headlock and maybe a boogie or two?
Yes.
Was his name Mark?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, actually, first game, yes, my husband was awful. It was because he'd never played D&D, so I don't think he realized this is a team game. So actually, we had to have a few talks with him when he would refuse to work with the party. He kept trying to run off by himself. Mark, I can't do this. But no, I've had a few players where they had some trouble with things that I would do, and there would be, and this one isn't Mark, but there would be some tantrums being thrown, and some pouting, and some muttered mean comments off in the corner as I'm doing something. So usually I've had to talk with people outside the game, afterwards and be like, hey, this isn't appropriate. Please stop.
You know what? It took me a while to realize it, but like the way I look at it, I think as a dungeon master, for the time that we put in it, regardless whether you just started this game or you've been doing it for a long time, especially if you're doing it for your players and you're not toxic or anything like that, you should be respected and appreciated at your table as much as you give respect to your players as well. Am I giving that weird background noise? I don't know if that's.
Sorry.
Oh no, sorry. Sorry. I didn't just want to make sure it wasn't me, because I know it could have been. But no, I feel like I've had I had to learn to have tough conversations with players, and I had to get to the point to not be afraid to say, because when we first started DMing, you just want people at the table. But I started being like, if it's starting to affect not just me but other players, it's time to have a conversation. Do you want to play the game? Do you? Yes. And it's okay to put it on myself. Be like, if I'm not the dungeon master for you, I'm sure you can find somebody who runs the game the way you're going. I get it. If I'm not, it's probably not going to change if you're the only one that is trying to get me to change something. So those conversations are tough, and I've had them with a few different players, especially once I started running games where, when I start DMing every Saturday. I run now like about 10 games a month. I run about 3 games a week on average. And, when it first started, you're playing with new people all the time. And some people expect you to DM a certain way, or they expect you to rule things a certain way. And you have conversations with them, but no matter how much, you start to realize those people that maybe just aren't feeling it. And you have and sometimes you have to have conversations because they'll just be like, I don't think this is my, my cup of tea. But I think we've all had to have those. A lot of them have been with my closer friends. Be like, hey, man, I don't think this game is really for you. Like, it's okay. You're not gonna hurt my feelings by not showing up anymore. Because secretly, I'm ready for you to stop showing up. It's like almost like it's like.
Oh yeah.
You get there, but the smarks and you're gonna do that. Listen, I've gotten to a point where I can't take. Like, I can't take you making comments at the table. You can pull me aside after the game and tell me I didn't like the way you ruled that. I can even have a little healthy, like, oh, but doesn't the rulebook, like, if a player tells me, like, doesn't the rulebook say, I'll be like, most of the time I'm like, you're right. But players,
it's all about how you say it too.
It's about how you do things at the table. I'll be like, you know what, you're right. Okay, that goes. Boom. I was ruling it that way. You made me see it. You're right. I was wrong. But the players that constantly hit you with little snarky comments and stuff like that, it's like, all right, well, yeah, I think this it's either that or your good character is going to end up dead very soon.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, you were saying, like, if they're ruining it for other people, like that really is where you draw the line. Because, like, I can understand why maybe someone might be mad about a ruling you did, or whatever. But it's like, if you're going to be sitting there, like, just causing a huge fuss about it, and everyone else is like noticing your mood, and then they're getting like anxious because someone's mad at the table, like, what do we do now? And then it's just it kind of ruins it.
It's tough when you have that player that, if there's one player upset, and it just everything starts going downhill. So
lots of social navigating.
We didn't get to everything on our list today, and I think there was a few more that we thought of after the fact in terms of topics. But I think this was great. I think we're gonna have to do this real soon. In fact, I had announced that we were bringing back the show, and the last time we were doing the show, I was inundated by questions from people who would watch them, and it's funny too, because some people would watch snippets on Instagram as well, where we were really, quality moments where I would bring it on over. But there seems to be a huge interest in a world building show, just on world building. It seems like a lot of people are interested in how to do it because it is so daunting. So we might have to have some special folks back just to talk about that. And it's one of my favorite topics. I really enjoy world building, but I also know that it's an enormous enormous undertaking. But there are tricks and shortcuts and all kinds of manner of things you can do to make it less painful. So
Absolutely.
definitely love to have you back, Malcolm, and Rachel, as always. Ashley, you're going to be with us for the long haul, and
Yes,
tequila,
internet
and
or
all.
no.
Yeah.
Tequila and apple juice and all. I'll have to try that. But I want to thank Malcolm and Rachel. I really appreciate you guys coming on. And Rachel, obviously, you're welcome back anytime. Malcolm, you're welcome back
Yeah.
anytime.
I'd love to be back. Thank you for
Yeah,
having me. Thank you
same.
for
It was
reaching out.
really fun.
I really had a good time.
And
Yeah.
I the more of these we do, the more fun they become. I think this is our 5th show, although we might release them out of order a little bit. So yeah, I just want to say thank you to everyone who's watching. Be sure to like and comment, subscribe, and share. And am I forgetting anything? Save it. It's so awesome. You know, shout it on top of the moon and
Yeah.
all that good stuff, because this was an incredible time, and I learned a lot myself, and that's the big thing. The more I talk to people, the more I learn myself. You know, I've been doing this for almost 40 years now, and every time I do one of these shows, I learn something new. You know, so I really appreciate everyone who comes on, and you guys are no exception to that. So thank you very much, everybody. With that, I'm gonna shut her down here.
Mm-hmm.
If you like what we do here on the channel, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell, because it really helps us out.